Welcome to Life Stories. Imagine being rejected, not for who you are, but for something you can't control, something as fundamental as biology. Now picture this. After years of heartache, you finally build a life, one not defined by bloodlines or family legacies, but by love, commitment, and the choice to embrace those who truly matter. But what happens when the past comes knocking? When the man who once walked away from you, choosing everything over family, rises to power, championing family values, as if he never left you broken. Would you let it go, or would you show him that the family he discarded is stronger than he ever imagined? Stick around to discover how one woman confronts her past and her ex, not with revenge, but with something far more powerful. Now, let's dive in. Rebecca Lawson stood on the balcony of her high-rise apartment in downtown Chicago, her fingers gently caressing the edges of the glass as the evening city lights flickered like a constellation of lost dreams below. The cold wind brushed against her cheeks, a reminder of how far she had come from the woman she used to be, the woman whose name had once been synonymous with the elite circles of Boston, a woman married to the promise of a perfect family, a perfect life, and a perfect future. But that life, it seemed, had been nothing more than a fragile illusion. She turned away from the view, her reflection in the glass catching her eye, a woman who had built something entirely new from the ashes of her former life. Her honey blonde hair, now streaked with strands of silver, framed her face with a sense of quiet strength. Her eyes, though still tinged with the remnants of old pain, sparkled with the fire of someone who had fought and survived. Yet tonight, there was a flicker of doubt that refused to settle, a question that lingered at the back of her mind. Could she ever truly escape the past? The soft hum of her phone vibrated against the counter, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, an incoming call from her son, Michael. Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly swiped to answer, pushing aside the nervous knot in her stomach. Hey, Mom, I was going through some old stuff today and I found something I think you need to see. Michael's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, something that made Rebecca's pulse quicken. What did you find, sweetheart? A brief silence. Your wedding announcement, from when you were married to him. Michael's words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy with unspoken implications. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the past settle over her once more. That name, that man, David Lawson, had not crossed her mind in years. The last time she had allowed herself to think of him, she had been standing in a courtroom, signing the divorce papers that had dissolved not just their marriage, but the vision of the perfect family she had spent her entire life building. I thought we'd left that behind, Michael, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned away from the window, her hand resting on the edge of the table where a half-empty coffee mug sat, untouched for hours. We did, Michael replied, his voice soft but firm. But I think it's time you face the truth about him, about what he really did to you. Her heart pounded as the words settled in. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected her children to dig into the past, to unearth the secrets she had spent years burying beneath the surface. But Michael, ever the determined one, had always been good at finding what others wanted to hide. Rebecca turned her gaze to the floor, the memories flooding back, too vivid, too painful. Her marriage to David had been the epitome of a carefully curated life. The fancy dinners, the political gatherings, the homes in the best neighborhoods, everything meticulously crafted to uphold the image of a perfect family. But beneath the polished exterior, cracks had begun to form. It had all come crashing down when Rebecca discovered that the one thing she couldn't give him, the one thing she had never imagined would matter so much, was the one thing he couldn't forgive. She couldn't have children. Mom, are you there? Michael's voice broke through her thoughts. Yes, I'm here, she replied, forcing a smile, though she knew he couldn't see it. What's going on with you finding this now? There was a pause, a hesitation in Michael's voice. I don't get it, Mom. He's this big shot now, running for state senate. Family values, legacy, all that stuff. But when it really came down to it, he left you because you couldn't give him a child, his own bloodline. Does that sound like a man who cares about family? The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had never told her children the full story. She had never shared the ugly truth of why David had walked away so easily, so quickly, as if she had been nothing more than an accessory to his perfect life. Michael, you don't understand. It wasn't just about the children. It was about his vision of what a family should be. And I didn't fit into that. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but she quickly steadied herself. What's important now is that we've built a family. Our family. You, Lily, Ava, you are my children. You are the family I've always needed. Michael was silent for a moment before responding. Mom, I think we need to make sure he knows that. He needs to see that you're doing just fine without him, and that we're not just some mistake in his perfect story. Rebecca felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Her son was always the quiet one, the one who held his cards close to his chest. But this was something different. He wasn't just asking questions anymore. He was demanding answers. He wanted to confront the past, and somehow, that meant she would have to face it too. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely audible. We have a plan, Michael said, his voice tinged with determination. We want him to know exactly who we are and what we've become. You didn't need him to build a family, Mom. We don't need him at all. A chill ran down her spine. What was he planning? What was Lily and Ava planning? The line between right and wrong blurred in that moment. Did she want revenge? No. Did she want closure? Perhaps. But deep down, she knew she needed something more. She needed to show David Lawson that his rejection hadn't broken her, and it hadn't broken her children. The family they had built from the rubble of his abandonment was strong, unshakable, and filled with love. But was it worth risking everything? Could she stand to face the man who had left her broken and alone, only to see him now, successful and smiling, in the middle of a campaign about family values? Rebecca felt her pulse quicken as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Could she walk into his world again? Could she bear to see the man who had discarded her for not fulfilling his ideal of what a family should be? What would you do if you had the chance to confront someone who had rejected you for something beyond your control? Is family truly about blood, or is it about the people who choose to love and stay, no matter the cost? Rebecca knew one thing for sure. She had come too far to let the past control her any longer. But what was the cost of facing it now? The answer, she realized, might change everything, and she was about to find out just how deep the secrets really ran. Rebecca sat on the edge of her bed, her fingers nervously twisting the corner of the pillowcase. Michael's words echoed in her mind, a constant hum that wouldn't fade. We have a plan. We want him to know exactly who we are. She hadn't been prepared for this. She wasn't prepared to confront David again, to see him standing in front of her, smug and self-assured, thinking he had won. But now, as she thought about it, something deep inside her stirred. Was it a need for closure? Was it a hunger for revenge? Or was it something else? Maybe it was the desire for recognition, for him to finally see the woman she had become, not the woman he had cast aside. The phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Michael again. Mom! His voice was clipped, serious, the way it had been earlier. We're going ahead with it. Going ahead with what? She asked, her heart skipping a beat. The plan. We're going to his gala. We've got everything set. We'll be there as part of the campaign event, not making a scene, just present, Michael said, the weight of his words hanging heavily between them. Rebecca hesitated, the knot in her stomach tightening. Was she ready for this? To walk back into the world that had once been her everything, only to see it for what it truly was? Her eyes flickered to the framed picture on her nightstand. Her family, her children. They were the only ones who mattered now. She had to do this, not for herself, but for them. For Michael, Lily, and Ava. They needed to see the man who had turned his back on their family for the shallow reason of biological inheritance. But as the plan took shape in her mind, so did the doubts. What would this do to her? to them. What would it mean to face him, to stand there in front of all those people, knowing that everything he stood for, everything he had built was a lie? And would it truly bring her the peace she longed for? Or would it simply open old wounds, scarring her all over again? That night, she lay awake, her thoughts spinning in 1,000 different directions. She thought about the life she had created in Chicago, the small victories, the quiet moments of joy that came with watching her children grow, knowing that they had all come together by choice, by love, not by chance. She had built something solid, something real. But she couldn't ignore the call of the past, the ghost of David's rejection that haunted her, hidden just beneath the surface. By morning, the decision was made. She couldn't back down now. The gala was in a week, and the countdown had begun. She needed to see this through, to show Michael, Lily, and Ava that they didn't need to bow to the idea of perfect families, that bloodlines didn't define their worth. They were enough. They had always been enough. The day of the event arrived with a heavy sense of inevitability. Rebecca stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the midnight blue gown she had chosen, a symbol of her strength, her resilience. She wasn't going to hide anymore, not from David, not from anyone. She had earned this moment. "Mom, you look beautiful," Emma said as she entered the room, adjusting her camera strap. She had grown into a poised young woman, her artistic eye sharper than ever. She smiled at Rebecca, and for a brief moment, Rebecca saw the child she had once been, full of hope and naivety. "Thanks, sweetie," Rebecca replied, trying to smile. But it didn't reach her eyes. Her thoughts were too tangled, her emotions too raw. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the future of her children, and the past she could never quite outrun. Zoe came in next, dressed in a shimmering silver gown, her quiet presence radiating an inner strength. She adjusted her piano bag with a deliberate motion, her fingers lingering on the strap. The selective mutism she had fought for years had mostly faded, but she still moved through the world with a grace that left her mother in awe. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Zoe asked softly, her voice low but steady. "We don't have to do this if it's too much." Rebecca looked at her, her heart swelling with love. "I'm sure," she said. "This is part of our story. I need you to see that too." And then Michael, dressed in a sharp black suit, stepped into the room. He looked every bit the young man he had grown into, confident, determined, and full of purpose. His eyes met hers, and she saw a flicker of something she hadn't expected. Guilt. "Everything's set downstairs," he said, his voice steady. "We're good to go." Rebecca nodded, though a part of her was still unsure. The tension in the room was palpable. They were all ready, but was she? As they descended the stairs and entered the ballroom, Rebecca's heart began to race. The familiar sense of being out of place crept in. This was his world, a world of polished smiles and calculated gestures. But this time, she wasn't the woman in the corner, looking on helplessly. She was the woman in the center of the room, with her children by her side, standing tall and unapologetic. The room was filled with whispers. A few familiar faces turned, trying to place her, but Rebecca didn't care. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for the one person who had once held her heart and then shattered it. There he was, across the room, talking with donors, the picture of political perfection. David. Her stomach tightened, and for a moment, she felt as though the ground might give way beneath her feet. But then she saw Michael, Zoe, and Ava, each of them moving with purpose, carving out their space in this world that had once been hers too. And just like that, the doubt faded. The first few moments were a blur. Zoe was already seated at the grand piano, her fingers dancing over the keys, filling the room with music. Emma was mingling, camera in hand, capturing the scene with her usual quiet intensity. Michael was everywhere, his eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail, and then focusing on Rebecca, ensuring everything went according to plan. Rebecca's eyes locked on David, and for a brief second their gazes met across the room. His expression faltered, the smooth facade he had so carefully crafted, slipping just enough for her to see the flicker of recognition, the brief flash of guilt. He made his way toward her, his steps slow, measured, as if approaching a ghost. But Rebecca didn't move. She didn't flinch. This was her moment, not his. He stood before her, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to look at him. Not with the longing or bitterness she had once felt, but with the quiet strength she had cultivated in the years since he left. "Rebecca," he said, his voice low, controlled, "I didn't expect to see you here." Rebecca's lips curled into a small smile. "Neither did I." David's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Rebecca saw it, the crack in his armor. The man who had once defined his worth by his legacy, his bloodline, was now standing before the very family he had rejected. The silence between them was thick with unspoken truths. And then, before either of them could speak again, Michael appeared beside Rebecca, his posture straight and purposeful. "Hello, Dad," Michael said, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that none of the room's chatter could mask. "How would you handle seeing someone who discarded you for something beyond your control? Would you choose to confront them or let the past go?" With every word, Rebecca felt her heart steady. This was the moment. And no matter what happened next, she was ready. She had nothing to prove. But as David's eyes met Michael's, something changed in the air. A shift, a twist that no one in the room expected. Rebecca stood in the center of the grand ballroom, her heart pounding in her chest as the soft echoes of Zoe's piano filled the space. The room had quieted when Michael spoke, his voice cutting through the whispers like a blade. "Hello, Dad." The moment felt surreal, as if time itself had come to a standstill. She watched as David's face shifted, the practiced smile faltering for the briefest moment. His eyes, once so full of calculated ambition, were now searching Michael's face, trying to find something, anything, that would anchor him in this moment. Michael stood tall, not a hint of fear in his posture. He was the son David had once rejected, but now he was a young man with a voice strong enough to carry his own truth. The truth Rebecca had spent years hiding, burying beneath the surface of a life she had created from heartbreak and resilience. David opened his mouth, but no words came. The political mask he had worn so carefully for so many years was slipping away, piece by piece, like an old garment unraveling. Rebecca's pulse quickened as she realized that in this moment, David's carefully constructed world was on the verge of collapse. He had been so obsessed with maintaining his legacy, with preserving his bloodline, but now he was face to face with the family he had abandoned. "I didn't expect you to be here," David said finally, his voice strained, controlled, but not nearly as confident as it once had been. Rebecca's lips parted, but she didn't respond right away. The truth of the moment hit her like a wave, overwhelming and undeniable. This wasn't just about confronting David. It was about confronting herself, too. The pain, the rejection, the anger she had buried deep down, they all rose to the surface like old wounds that hadn't healed. For the first time in years, she felt a strange sense of clarity. She wasn't just here to see David squirm. She was here to claim her peace, her closure. She had fought so long to create a family from nothing, to raise her children with love and purpose, and she had done it without him. Her eyes flicked toward Michael, standing beside her. His jaw was clenched, his gaze steady and unflinching. Zoe was at the piano, her fingers dancing over the keys with a quiet intensity. Ava stood nearby, her camera poised, capturing the moment in her lens. They were her family now, not the man who had walked out when she couldn't give him what he wanted. They were the family she had built, the family that had always been enough. "You left me," Rebecca finally said, her voice calm but cutting through the air like a sharp blade. "You walked away when I couldn't give you a child, when I couldn't fulfill your idea of what a family should be." David's eyes darted around the room, his face flushing. His political mask was beginning to crack, the confidence he had relied on slipping through his fingers. "I had my reasons," he muttered, almost defensively. Rebecca took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "Your reasons weren't good enough. You said you needed your own bloodline, your own legacy. But what you failed to see is that family isn't about DNA. It's about the people who choose you, who show up when it matters most." The silence between them stretched on, thick with unspoken truths. David stood there, his face hardening, but Rebecca could see the flicker of something else in his eyes. Regret? Shame? It was hard to tell. He had built his life around a lie, and now, here in front of him, stood the proof of everything he had lost. "I'm not here to make you feel guilty," Rebecca continued, her voice steady. "I'm here to show you what I've built without you. To show you the family you couldn't see, the family I've raised with love, with everything I am." The words hung in the air, and for a moment Rebecca felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The years of bitterness, the anger she had held onto for so long, it was gone, replaced with something she hadn't expected: peace. She had faced him, she had spoken her truth, and now she could finally let go of the past. David's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. Instead, he turned away, his gaze flicking to his wife, Catherine, who stood nearby, looking lost and confused. It wasn't just Rebecca he had left behind. It was the idea of family, the real, messy, imperfect kind of family that didn't care about bloodlines or legacies. As David walked away, Rebecca turned to her children, who had watched the entire exchange with quiet intensity. Michael caught her eye, his expression a mixture of pride and relief. Zoe's fingers stilled on the keys, and Ava lowered her camera, the weight of the moment settling over them like a blanket of understanding. "We're not here to embarrass him," Michael said quietly, his voice strong but gentle. "We're here to be seen, to show him that we're not just the family he left behind. We're a family that's stronger than anything he could have ever imagined." Rebecca smiled, her heart swelling with love for her children. "Yes, we are." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. There were no more confrontations, no more harsh words. David kept his distance, but Rebecca didn't care. She had already won. Not in the way she thought she would, but in the way that truly mattered. She had built a family that was real, that was hers, and no one could take that from her. As they left the event, walking out into the cool night air, Rebecca felt a sense of closure that she hadn't known she needed. She had faced her past, and in doing so, she had freed herself from it. And as she looked at her children, she realized that this was the family she had always been meant to have, the one she had built, not with blood, but with love. They drove home in silence, the weight of the evening slowly sinking in. Rebecca glanced in the rearview mirror, her children in the back seat, their faces calm, content. They had done it. They had faced their past and come out stronger for it. Later that night, as she tucked her children into bed, Michael turned to her, his voice soft. "Mom, do you ever think about what he's doing now? About his campaign?" Rebecca paused, her hand lingering on Michael's forehead. "Not really," she said. "I've got everything I need right here. This," she gestured to the room, to her children, to the life they had built. "This is my legacy." What would you do if you had the chance to confront someone who had rejected you for something beyond your control? Would you seek closure or let it go? Rebecca knew that no matter where life took them, this moment, this family, was the true legacy she would leave behind. Her story was no longer defined by the man who walked away. It was defined by the love she had created, by the children who called her mother, and by the peace she had finally found. If you enjoyed this story, drop a 100 in the comments to show your support. What did you think of the twist at the end? Where are you watching from? Let us know. And if this story resonated with you, share it with your friends. Thank you for following Lifes.